The United States is currently deploying naval strike groups to the Middle East at a volume unseen in recent decades. A glance at any major news network will tell you this mobilization is driven by deeply rooted historical grievances and complex religious disputes. But a recent industry white paper argues that this narrative is an incredibly effective geopolitical smokescreen. As this graphic illustrates, the public is focused entirely on the shadowed ghost of artificial intelligence. This analysis suggests the massive military presence is anchored to the protection of a physical $1.5 trillion hardware substrate. We are conditioned to view modern computing as a weightless, ethereal cloud, a system of pure code operating completely detached from the physical world. The deployment represents a massive strategic maneuver to prevent the physical collapse of the global tech economy. The $1.5 trillion capital expenditure driving the AI boom does not involve writing software. It requires bending metal and pouring concrete. This economic surge is tethered to the mass production of two physical components: advanced logic chips and high-bandwidth memory. Training a large language model requires moving gargantuan datasets simultaneously. High-bandwidth memory acts as an ultra-wide, multi-lane superhighway to transport that information. Without that physical superhighway, the logic chip starves. It cannot access the data it needs, and the system cannot learn. Manufacturing these chips requires etching circuit pathways that are only a few atoms wide. It demands an impossibly sterile, multi-billion-dollar production environment. The primary facilities capable of this extreme manufacturing are highly concentrated. The industry relies almost entirely on TSMC in Taiwan and Samsung in South Korea. The entire world of AI software is hopelessly tethered to the physical output of these specific East Asian factories. Carving silicon at an atomic scale requires an exclusive, highly complex manufacturing process known as extreme ultraviolet lithography. Inside these machines, microscopic violence occurs. A high-powered laser fires at a suspended droplet of molten tin inside a vacuum chamber, instantly vaporizing it. This process is repeated 50,000 times every single second. These rapid explosions generate unnatural plasma, emitting an extreme ultraviolet light at a 13.5 nanometer wavelength. That wavelength does not naturally occur on Earth. To capture and focus this light onto silicon, the machine uses highly polished, multi-million-dollar Zeiss mirrors. Generating 50,000 tiny explosions a second next to the most precise mirrors on the planet creates immense heat and stray debris. The system requires a constant cooling and purging medium to protect the optics. This protective buffer is absolutely constrained to one element, 6N purity helium, meaning it is 99.9999% pure. Every other chemical alternative fails. Nitrogen or hydrogen would either absorb the ultraviolet light entirely, ruining the etching, or explosively react with the tin plasma. Helium is the only viable option. It is a completely inert noble gas and possesses the lowest boiling point of any element in the universe. The periodic table dictates the strict terms of this process. There are 0 chemical substitutes, leaving the entire tech sector a hostage to physical chemistry. That microscopic chemical requirement connects directly to the macrogeography of the Middle East. This satellite view highlights the Persian Gulf and the small peninsula of Qatar. The Ras Laffan complex located here produces roughly 33% of the world's helium supply. Recent missile strikes have permanently knocked 14% of that critical production capacity offline. This localized physical damage carries a rigid 5-year reconstruction timeline, drastically tightening the global supply of the gas. Extracting the remaining liquid helium out of this volatile region requires specialized ISO shipping containers like these. This introduces a rigid logistical constraint. Unlike crude oil, liquid helium cannot be stockpiled indefinitely because it naturally and continuously boils. A container of liquid helium operates on a strict thermodynamic timer. It will completely vaporize within 35 to 48 days. The shelf life of the gas transforms the Strait of Hormuz into a ticking countdown for the global computing industry. A maritime blockade in the Strait of Hormuz immediately breaks global shipping logistics. Blocked commercial vessels are forced to abandon their direct maritime routes. The highly efficient passage connecting the Persian Gulf to East Asia is completely severed. To reach their destination, these massive ships must execute a grueling detour. navigating entirely around the African continent and past the Cape of Good Hope. Comparing transit times reveals a massive disparity. The standard route is highly efficient, but the Cape detour adds weeks. Overlaying the strict vaporization timer onto this extended journey breaks the system. The reroute explicitly exceeds the helium's thermodynamic shelf life. While the ship is still in transit, the payload literally evaporates into the atmosphere. The specialized containers arrive at the ports completely empty. Without a constant, precisely timed supply of this gas arriving, the massive fabrication plants at TSMC and Samsung must immediately halt production. The macroeconomic consequence is immediate. $1.5 trillion in capital expenditure instantly becomes highly expensive paperweights. The primary objective of these naval forces is preventing the physical evaporation of the 21st century economy before it can reach the factories in East Asia. Contrast this severe maritime vulnerability with the strategic maneuvering of international competitors, specifically China. Realizing the fragility of the sea lanes, China is actively scaling domestic helium production to permanently reduce their reliance on Middle Eastern exports. They are pairing this with a secondary strategy of securing land-based energy and resources through infrastructure like the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. Terrestrial pipelines offer an immense strategic advantage. They provide a continuous, physically protected flow of materials, entirely isolated from vulnerable, time-sensitive shipping lanes. Securing geographically sovereign resources allows a nation to completely bypass explosive sea choke points and thermodynamic evaporation timers. The U.S. allied tech stack is fragile, dependent on volatile oceans, and constrained by a ticking clock. Its primary competitor is physically grounded and land-based. Innovation in software carries zero weight if the physical elements required to run it remain outside of your control. The AI revolution will not be decided by who builds the best algorithm in the cloud. It will be won by whoever successfully commands the raw, unyielding thermodynamic constraints of the physical Earth.